I'm Bruce Gordon. The U.S.S. Seawolf, captained by fearless Freddie Warder, was one of the most famous U.S. submarines of World War II. I have just read a book about the Seawolf by Joseph Ekberg, who was a sonar man on the Seawolf. I'll tell you a story of the Seawolf that is not in his book. In 1944, during World War II, my father was manager of the Eastman Kodak Company in Honolulu. His office processed many of the gun camera movies that you have seen. On several occasions, he took me down to his office, and I was able to watch fresh gun camera film before anyone else had seen it and before it had been given to the press. Many military officers came down to the office also to watch the movies, and my father became friends with many of them. Some of them he invited to our house for supper. I was able to hang around and listen to these officers telling how the war was going. For a 10-year-old boy, this was heaven. One evening, Captain Fearless Freddie Warder of the U.S.S. Seawolf showed up at our house for a nice home-cooked meal. Freddie Warder and my father had been friends for several years, and this evening Freddie told us about some troubles he was having with torpedoes. Freddie Warder and the Seawolf were dispatched to Manila before the war began. They put into Cavite Naval Yard for major repairs, and at this time Freddie Warder and my father met. Those pre-war years were very pleasant for the Seawolf and her crew, but all the talk of war convinced my father to take our family out to the safety of Hawaii. 10 hours after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, the Japanese attacked our base at Clark in the Philippines, destroying most of our Air Force on the ground. But they did not hit Cavite Naval Yard. The Seawolf was able to take on a fresh load of torpedoes and got out of Manila Bay before the Japanese came back to destroy Cavite. The Seawolf found a Japanese ship unloading supplies in a cove in the northern Philippines. The Seawolf fired 4 torpedoes and heard 2 explosions, but did not hit the ship. Freddie Warder thought that the torpedoes had gone underneath the ship and had exploded on the beach. These new torpedoes had a magnetic fuse which was supposed to detonate as the torpedo passed just underneath the ship. If they didn't go under the ship and hit the side of the ship, a regular contact fuse was supposed to make them explode anyway. The Seawolf was ordered back to the southwest as the Japanese were moving in on Singapore. The Seawolf attacked more ships with some success. Freddie Warder felt that the torpedoes were running too deep, so he ordered them to be set shallow and hoped that the contact fuse would set them off. That worked some of the time, but sometimes the torpedoes would go off before they got to the ships, and once he saw a torpedo hit the side of the ship, climb up in the air, and fall back into the water without exploding. The Seawolf went to Australia to get more torpedoes, and Freddie Warder filed a complaint saying the torpedoes were defective. But he was told that it was his fault and that he had done something wrong. The torpedoes were perfect. More submarine captains reported defective torpedoes, but still the Navy would not listen. After more failures, Freddie Warder decided he had to prove the Navy wrong. He found a Japanese ship anchored in a bay, unloading supplies for troops who were setting up a camp in the jungle. There were no enemy escort ships around, so he could take his time. He took a new torpedo, set it for the recommended depth, and fired. The torpedo went underneath the transport ship, came out on the beach on the far side, ran up into the camp full of Japanese, and did not explode. He took a second new torpedo, also set for the recommended depth, and fired it. It went under the ship and up on the beach where it did explode. He took a third new torpedo, but this time he set it to run shallow and fired it. It hit the Japanese ship and climbed up on the air and fell back in the water without exploding. The Japanese ship and the troops on the shore had noticed that they were under attack. They saw his periscope, and the deck gun opened fire at his periscope. The artillery on the ground began to fire at him. He took his oldest torpedo, and really old one, and fired it at the ship. This time it hit the ship, exploded, and sank the ship. He took this picture. The Navy heard the complaints of Freddie Warder and other submarine captains and began to do some really serious tests. I found out some data as I was doing research to make this video. The combat warhead used in these torpedoes was quite a bit heavier than the dummy warheads used by the Navy in making their tests. As a result, the torpedoes were running as much as 11 feet deeper than planned. Moreover, the contact fuses used on the torpedoes had been tested only in laboratory conditions and did not work if the impact against the ship was not directly straight on. They found also that sometimes the rudders on the torpedo would jam hard over, causing the torpedo to go in a circle and come back and hit the submarine that fired them. We lost 2 submarines that way, and 2 submarines survived near misses and came back to report the problem. In my research for this video, I found an existing YouTube video that looks like it was made in the 1950s, featuring Rear Admiral Freddie Warder himself. I think I have more information in this than they have, but take a look at it. It makes a good viewing. Fearless Freddie Warder retired as a Rear Admiral in charge of the U.S. submarine fleet. His dogged persistence to find the truth in spite of real personal risks showed that he had the spirit of attack.